Welcome to the Catalyst Sale Podcast with Mike and Mike. Sales is a thinking process. This podcast will help you learn about what works in sales, how to hone your skills, and increase your success. I'm your host, Jody Mayberry. Week after week, Mike Simmons and Mike Connor are on this show telling you what they know about sales, answering listener questions. They give us so much knowledge, but in one form or another, we tend to get the question of what else does Catalyst Sale do? Tell us more about what you do. So we're going to devote a series of podcasts here about the work that Catalyst Sale does. And we're going to begin with establishing market fit for your product. So Mike and Mike, start us in the beginning with that. We're going to talk about establishing that market fit.
So yeah, Jody, that was a good way to kind of set up the conversation for today. I think one of the things that we've always viewed the podcast as a way for Mike and I to share experience and knowledge and really just make it a resource that hopefully people will get value from. And so that's really been the focus. I think you described it very well. What we want to talk about are some of the real things that we do every day. We don't just sit around and make podcasts. In fact, this has kind of become like a hobby kind of thing. But the other thing too is to shed some light on some of the, if you want to call them practice areas, or some of the things that we do for our clients. One of the things that we've really made clear, and this is really where our business was born, was helping sales organizations scale, helping build sales teams. If a company needed to launch a new team or supplement a team in an area where it's hard to hire employees, all of those things are really our core sort of business model that we started with. And we've done that over the last 18 months and have done that for several clients. But we also do more than that for clients that are in different stages of their life cycle. So in other words, some companies aren't ready to actually hire a sales team. Some companies aren't ready to make that investment, or maybe they've made the investments and they found out it was too soon. But because we network with a lot of early stage companies, a lot of founders, we are located, obviously we've mentioned, we're located at Arizona State University as an affiliate member of ASU's sort of incubator program. We're in that co-working space. So we have the opportunity to talk to founders every day. And one of the conversations that we usually wind up with is not so much about building a sales organization or getting things ready to go to generate revenue, but it's those early stages, between the idea that they have and have I established product market fit? Have I, really figured out, have I run our product through the courses? Do we really know who we're selling to? Do we have validation from the market that we're on the right track? And then the readiness, are we ready to actually start taking an MVP version of our product to market? And what does that look like? And we find ourselves doing a lot of that kind of work. So as we've evolved as a company ourselves, we've taken that on as I'll call it a practice area to say, if you're an early stage company and you're a founder and you're a handful of people, and maybe you have a small team, but you're very product focused and not so much, end user focused, or even have the backgrounds that Mike and I have, we've been doing more of that kind of work. And so we wanted to highlight that in today's discussion to say, what is it that we do for companies? Talk about some examples of how we've helped some early stage companies, because we have mentioned at a high level, we want to help founders avoid having to hit the reset button. And let's talk about that a little bit more today. What does that look like? What do we do for companies? How do we make that happen? Am I on the right track, Mike?
Yeah, I think it's a great topic to go through. And I think sharing some of that experience, we've worked with founders as an example who don't use their own product. And it's hard for a founder to articulate product market fit if they're not actually using their own product. So we can talk about the good, the bad, the ugly, and share the process that we go through as an organization.
So number one on the list for all the learning we've had, and we're talking about, not just people we've talked to in passing. These are, real client engagements that we've been part of for the last 18 months or so. And every one of them is different. And I think that's one of the things that's interesting. There's a commonality with the gaps as far as what the problems are and what the potential problems are going to be. But every one of them is completely unique. And it can range from deficiencies. Mike mentioned one example where we have a founder that actually doesn't use the product, which is kind of unusual. I mean, most founders it's usually the opposite end of the spectrum. They use the product, they live the product, they love the product, and they see the world through the lens of their product. And imagine being 180 degrees from there and actually being in a position where you like the vision of what the problem the product can solve, but the product in itself is something you don't like to use, or it's just not your thing. I'll say it that way. Imagine if that's the founder's outlook and what challenges and problems that can create for a team, because the founder can be very in love with the vision and the solution and how the world's going to look after they've changed the world. But at the end of the day, if the founder doesn't want to log into their own platform, that's a huge red flag.
Right, huge red flag. And there may be this, likely in that scenario, there's a big disconnect between the vision that they have, what the product could do, and what it actually does. And so that gets us into our process. And one of the process items that we'll go through is use case testing. So we'll identify the use cases from the perspective of the founder, from the perspective of the leadership team, from the perspective of the people that are in the organization. You've got to get multiple perspectives here, but we'll identify the use cases that they most directly align with. We'll begin to test out those use cases directly. And this is where, where we talk about breaking the product and seeing how we can put it through the paces to align with those use cases. And then beyond that, what we'll say is, who do we know inside our circle of trust or inside our network who aligns with those use cases, and let's get them to test and provide feedback so that it's not just our perspective based on what we're hearing from the organization, but it's also people who are in the personas that the organization would be targeting and getting their feedback. So use case alignment is really important to us.
Yeah. And talking, that's one of the things too, is talking to people outside of the bubble is the one way I would say it, is that a lot of times what we'll see is that there's a bubble of influence that happens where early adopters or people that really like what you're doing will give you great feedback and they'll tell you you're doing all the right things. And I've seen pivots and I've seen product changes and complexity introduced into the workflow that's based on anecdotal feedback or feedback from one user. And I think one of the things that we do for companies is we bring a new perspective to the table, because we're not married to the product. We're not married to the pain that a team went through to get to where they are. And we can look at things very objectively and have conversations with people that are their target market or who they think their target market might be. And in a lot of cases, the outcomes from those discussions, it can be a very short engagement where we're involved for, maybe a week or two, where we're providing these insights with, giving them some actionable things that they can go build against. In some cases, it might be a little bit longer term where we're talking to end users and helping form what that pivot could look like. What would we have to do to change the product? And then reiteration on what that feedback looks like from that prospective buyers. And, in one case, one project we worked on, we actually, over a period of 8 months, sort of shepherded the process through three major product shifts. And every time there was a major product shift, there was a lot of emphasis placed on, how it's going to address where we want to go and where we want to be, with very little regard for how's that going to disrupt what momentum are we going to give up? So there's always a lot of emphasis on where we want to go and how great it could be, but how much, not just technical debt, because I think a lot of people focus on technical debt, but organizational debt, process debt, culture debt. The people that you've brought into the organization, are they the same people that can succeed post pivot? Are they the same? Is it the same horsepower that you're going to need? Because every dollar you invest in a startup or an early stage company is critical. And those are shifting sands that you have to really manage.
Well, and each time you pivot, your value prop changes. Well, not always, but depending on how hard that pivot is, your value prop could change, which ultimately impacts sales cycles, targets, revenue generation. I mean, it all kind of, rolls downhill. One of the other things that we like to think about as we go through this, and this can be really hard for founders to go through it. This isn't about calling someone's baby ugly. It's about taking an objective approach to providing feedback. It's awesome if friends and family really like what you're doing, but remember, they've got to live with you. So their interest in being direct and candid may not be be as strong as my interest when Mike asks me a question. I'm pretty direct and candid back to him. But then again, I don't have to live with him other than on Wednesdays when I come in the office.
Yeah. So Wednesdays, I don't get honest feedback, but the rest of the week when you're in your home office, it's like, he'll let me know pretty directly if I'm on the right path or not.
Pretty much.
Mike, you have all this great information about establishing market fit and what Catalyst Sale does. But now I'm interested in knowing, as a founder listening, how would we know that this might be the time to talk to Mike and Mike, to reach out to Catalyst Sale, to work together to establish market fit?
So I could answer that from a couple of perspectives, because I know we have a wide audience with people with different roles and perspectives. We have a lot of salespeople that listen to this podcast. Hopefully we've got founders and early stage company leaders that listen to this as well. I would say from different perspectives, if you're a founder or if you're an early stage executive on a team and you're trying to move things forward and you've found that you're moving forward or you're pivoting quite a bit, but not actually understanding why. I mean, it's really kind of hard to describe one symptom that would say it would probably be a good idea to get a view from the outside. But I think if you find yourself in a repetitive loop, didn't we already talk about this last week and then the week before that, and you just feel like you're stuck, would be one way to look at that, where we're so close to the trees right now, we can't see the forest. I mean, that's where we can really help with a fresh perspective and try and get things on track, because it's not just about the product. It's not just about the fit in itself, but it's also about things like, where do we see gaps inside of a team and a team dynamic? It's understanding, are you focusing in the right places? And I think one of the things that I find really interesting is, because we've talked to so many different companies and we've had a lot of experience in different industries and verticals and things like that, that sometimes just the business acumen and the ability to see how a team's functioning and how things are working, very quickly we can get up to speed with where you're stuck. And so I think from that perspective, if you feel like you're stuck, I think we can help with that. I think if you're even a salesperson that works for an early stage company, that you're the recipient of a lot of this chaos and a lot of these changes. And as a salesperson, do you feel like your CEO or your founder could use some help in really getting a very clear understanding of what you're going to market with? Because sometimes in sales, we're kind of the recipients of the pivot. And if you find yourself with a new update of here's what we're going to go to market with now, and you find that changing every 60 days and not getting momentum, maybe put a sticky note on your founder's desk, say, hey, you should get a hold of these guys. Maybe they can help us. So I don't know. It's a tough question to answer right off the top of my head.
If you watch Silicon Valley on HBO, and in many of those episodes, you think they're talking about the company you work in or the company you're running, it might make sense to give us a call.
Okay, where can people get a hold of you, Mike and Mike?
The easiest way to get a hold of us, Jody, is just go on catalystsale.com. We'll be launching a contact page that's specific to the different practice areas that we're developing right now. We expect to go live with that. It will be live by the time this airs, and it'll have more detail around what this practice area looks like, what the deliverables are, and a very easy way to get a hold of us.
We'll also include some links in the show notes related to those as well. And you can always hit us up on Twitter at Catalyst Sale, or you can connect with us directly via our personal Twitter account. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Mike and Mike, for another great show. And thank you for listening to the Catalyst Sale Podcast.